today we're happy to see a person who is involved with the Leila Arboretum Society, directors, as a matter of fact. They made a big input in the west end of our town. Brett Myers.
Thank you very much, Charlie. Thank you all for having me here today. Nowadays, I'm Brett. I'm the executive director of Leila Arboretum Society, and I've been working for the Arboretum for 20 years now, which I have a background in horticulture. That's my training. I graduated from a wonderful, wonderful university to the south of us in the middle of Ohio. I'm required by graduation standards to say the Ohio State University. I laugh about it as much as everybody else does. But I did. I graduated in horticulture. Ohio State was actually my third university. I'm originally from Toledo. So you can imagine ending up in Michigan wasn't that much of a stretch for me. In fact, we went up to Ann Arbor and Detroit a lot for music and entertainment and other things like that. I can tell you that these days, Leila Arboretum, the society, we view what we do as the management of an 85-acre campus. 72 of those 85 acres is the Leila Arboretum, which is a city park. It's owned by the city of Battle Creek, and we manage that property, that 72 acres, as an arboretum for the city of Battle Creek. In addition to those 72, we own 13 acres that was gifted to the Arboretum Society partially by the Doty family, Huberta and Wendell Doty, as well as about half of that property was owned by Neighborhoods Incorporated. And the Leila Arboretum Society is a private, nonprofit, incorporated entity that became incorporated around 1984. And these days we talk about having some 80,000 visitors per year that go through the Arboretum. We have some 3,000 trees and shrubs that are part of our collections that are actually accessioned and part of our database. Hundreds and hundreds of volunteers and volunteer hours that go into the care and management of the property. We have a variety of different programs, a horticulture training center, an urban farm, 365 urban farm. There's a 1-acre outdoor hands-on classroom that was originally called the Children's Garden. We've recently renamed it the Kaleidoscope Garden. What we learned over the years is that by calling it a children's garden, we kind of didn't wrap our arms quite wide enough, and adults didn't think it was for them. I was there at the front entrance on a Saturday one time, and a group of European tourists came up and asked me what the space was, and I said it was our children's garden. And they said, "Oh, that's not for us," and they turned around and walked back to the Arboretum. And we can't have that. Our pockets are shallow. We'd have stuff out for sale in any lobby we had if we could to try to generate dollars. And by renaming it Kaleidoscope Garden, we think it very accurately describes a garden. It is an ever-changing kaleidoscope of colors. And it still embraces our youth programming purpose and goals, but it is the most intensively landscaped space that we have in the Arboretum. And as adults with property and who are gardeners and have landscapes to worry about themselves, we think that's a great space for inspiration. We had a 50-year-old's birthday party in there a week ago that would never have happened previously when it was a children's garden. Over the years, we've done a variety of different programs, and from street tree plantings and neighborhood sign lots and different things around town. And there's more and more and more to talk about there, and I'll probably kind of come back to the current status of things. I have things to hand out and pass around, and Leila Arboretum, the property around the turn of the century, was actually the Battle Creek Country Club. Did you guys everybody knew that in the room? You did not know? It was a 9-hole golf course, and I don't know, and maybe you guys can even fill me in. At some point along the way, and I'm still a little fuzzy on this, Lila Post Montgomery, C.W. Post's widow, acquired the property after the golf course had moved to Capitol Avenue, where it is currently. Does anybody know, has anybody heard that transition? I don't know how she acquired it. And somebody said that it might have been a relation where it was gifted to her. She then came up with a plan to gift it to the city of Battle Creek. And back at that time, when folks made donations to public entities, whether it be state, federal, city, they did not, those entities did not have a plan in place to require that money was given with the gift as well. She actually dictated to the city of Battle Creek that I will give you this gift if you create a budget of $5,000 per year to initiate plantings and installation of other displays and so forth. And I've been told, and I don't know the exact date, that some point around all of this is going to where we didn't have this massive endowment to go with the property for operational things. And as I talk about it, you can see how and why our nonprofit was started many years later. It was around the 50s, somewhere in the 50s, that the federal government realized that they could not accept gifts that did not have cash to go with them to support their care. I can tell you that we have people walk in on the grounds of the Arboretum all the time wanting to give us stuff, and sometimes we have to say no because we know we can then not care for it because we don't have the resources to do so. In fact, I have a lawn tractor that was given to us that we had to put a bunch of money into to make it right, if you will. And so anyway, she gave the property, this is 72 acres, to the city of Battle Creek. And I'll hand this around, but it says, greatest botanical garden in the world planned by Battle Creek. And this was around 1922 that this took place. And there's a picture of Lila Post Montgomery up there. There's a line drawing of the facade of Kingman Museum. And what the vision, her vision, as well as city leaders' vision was, is that this space, this property, would become the cultural center of the Battle Creek city proper and as well as the region. As you can imagine, when they say world's greatest, they weren't thinking just within the city limits and so forth. There was, Brigham was one of the characters involved, and he was going around the world at that time collecting artifacts from all over and bringing them back to the Battle Creek area. At the time, the city had a landscape architect that was on staff named T. Clifton Shepard, and he did the original designs for the property. T. Clifton also designed Piper Park. There was about 6 of them, and I might have to look and find out exactly what that was. Begg Park, Piper Park, Lila. And I think there were 2 or 3 other parks that he designed for the... Oh, Irving Park was one of those that he had done as well. And if I miss anything and you guys know, please jump in and help me out with that. This isn't the one I wanted. Yeah, under the plan that's newly worked out, the 72 acres would be devoted to the triple purpose of a public park, an arboretum, and a site for a new history museum, an archaeological museum, a hall of music, a public auditorium, and other structures that would be built there. So, you know, we know now that Kingman Museum of Natural History is on the property, but they had actually planned on building a number of other structures. And being from Ohio and going to Ohio State, I've been up to Cleveland a number of times, and there is a confluence of different separate nonprofit organizations and buildings in the Cleveland area. You have the Modern Museum Art and the, I forget these days, there's the Holden Arboretum, which is off site, but there's all of these different spaces, and it becomes, you know, when I talk about this to kids and so forth, why do all of our auto dealerships kind of cloister in the same area? There is this threshold that is surpassed that gets people to go there. Yes, there's competition. We nonprofits, you know, we kind of compete with each other for dollars and so forth. But when we collaborate and work together, you now can really grab people's interest and become this significant destination. And I think that's what they wanted to achieve at that time, is have this great destination with all these different types of institutions. And I think there was another Yeah, Mr. Brigham, in planning for an arboretum, they would plant one tree at least of every type that can thrive in the soil of Michigan. As a horticulturist, I will be the first one to admit that there is so much that I don't know about plants. I have been a horticulturist for nearly 30 years now, and I feel very professional and skilled at what I know, but I've learned, one of the jokes that I say is that if anything I've learned over the years is why I killed something when I planted it. That's a huge achievement to know why why that plant in the windowsill died or in the backyard or whatever, but I don't claim to know all that much, and really, but that's a really lofty goal, one of everything, and we do have a fantastic collection in the Arboretum. What happened, and I'll just go ahead, and there's a picture of T. Clifton, and here's a picture of Lila Post Montgomery. And then
Which husband did she have when she gave that away? Was that the first one or was the second?
Montgomery was the second, wasn't it? She became a Montgomery after C.W. passed away, I believe. So I think she was Montgomery at that time. And then this says winter of 1928, and you can see that they've recently planted the trees on the property at that time. And how amazing is it, I think when I go out there and I see these, there's Norway spruce, there's white spruce, there's Serbian spruce, there's Fraser firs and Scotch pine and so forth. And some of these are 120 feet tall now, and obviously 100 years old at this point as well. Unfortunately, and they had also, and I have a picture here that will kind of show this. Which one is this? Oh, this is another picture of Lila Post Montgomery, and this is one that we actually have up in the office all the time. They started with 72 acres. But the plan was actually, they were to build these buildings, have these institutions in there, and the plan was to expand to 1,300 acres. I have been down to the Birnheim Forest, which is near Louisville, Kentucky, and that is a 1,300-acre research institution. They have different species of trees lined out. You can go see, when you visit that arboretum, you will see oak trees lined out, pine trees, and it is done for research purposes, so we can see them all kind of together. This arboretum was done with an aesthetic eye. T. Clifton was trying to recreate an open pastoral setting that was similar to English countryside gardens. So you don't see just trees lined out. You see some groupings here and there. We have some arborvitae collections together, but it was more so done with complementary plantings, where nowadays one of the things I focus on when I do plant designs are leaf textures and having different leaf textures against each other, like the big broad leaves of a hosta next to the fine lacy leaves of a fern or something like that. And that's what T. Clifton tried to achieve with this design. Very early on it was thought to be, and I know later on the Leila Arboretum Society wanted this to be every man's garden, or every man's estate, if you will. It was open and free, and that was in the deed to the property when Lila Post gave it to the city of Battle Creek. Now, as the manager of the space, we would love to have a gate and charge admission, but I can also tell you that no arboretum in this country's budget is saved by admission either. You still need private donors and grants and all those wonderful kinds of things. I love this picture because here's Kingman Museum, and you can see there's kind of exposed sand or soil around it. It has not had a chance to grow weeds, so this is very close to the time of construction. And all of this property, all this nursery space in behind is actually part of like Oneida Street neighborhood, Battle Creek Academy, Northwestern Middle School. All of that is incorporated back here, and if we went for a walk in the woods next to Northwestern Middle School, I can find you apple trees that are in that woods, and you kind of go, where the heck did these apple trees come from in the middle of this woodlot? And they are remnants of the apple orchards that used to be planted out behind the property. Unfortunately, when the Depression hit, and I think this bears close examination, so we'll go ahead and pass this around as well. Unfortunately, when the Depression hit in the 30s, I think they got Kingman built in early, around 30, 31, something like that, 28, 29, 30, 31. All of their plans kind of fell to the wayside. Everybody's budget, the $5,000 set aside for care and operation of the Arboretum, went away. And when you look at our collection tags at the Arboretum, we have a code on there. And in the example of these trees, they might say 1924/0356, and that would mean that was the 356th tree planted in 1924. Nowadays, you would see 2019-0001, and that would represent the first tree we planted this year. And that is a way to reference back to our database for our collections. When the plans went to the wayside, the city did not have a budget to care for the Arboretum. So you have this gap all the way from the late 20s, early 30s, all the way up until 1984. 50 years where the city simply plowed the roads, and it was just a gravel loop that went around the property at the time, and mowed the grass. They did not have a budget for tree plantings or maintenance care and so forth. Am I supposed to get off the stage now? Is that the flashing light? Here's another early picture of the Arboretum, and you can see, if you look at this picture here, up in the middle here is an oak tree, and that remains one of the biggest, oldest oak trees. I would guess that tree could be nearly 100 years old at that point. So this oak tree that is sort of a center signature oak tree in the Arboretum could be a couple hundred years old. We know oaks, there's oaks in Irving Park that are 400 some years old. We know oaks that can live 400 or 500 years. We're not anywhere near what our redwoods can do out in the California region. But you'll notice in this picture, you can see Michigan Avenue with that little bit of a curvature. 20th Street does not exist yet in this photo. And you can see Kingman's been built, but it kind of has that soil around it. Limit Street has not been created yet at this point. And there was actually a very large lagoon or pond that was on the property. And I was told it used to flood here all the time. So they channelized this creek, flow through, created 20th Street and so forth. So we still have a little pond, but it was pretty interesting. There are some very old photos that show a clubhouse in this area and a lady with her parasol and a gentleman oaring a boat through here. And this was, quite a thing, I would imagine, prior to 1900 when it was the country club. But definitely a fun picture to look at. You can see the bulk of the collections are still, 4 or 5 feet tall, recently planted.
Was the pond natural, or they graded that pond?
I couldn't say for sure. Now, I have heard stories. I've been told that when they developed the property, they used tons of dynamite to blast various features into the property. They also, I can tell you that as rainy as it's been, one of my jokes that I've always said about the property is it can rain for 2 months straight and be dry 2 days later, because we have a very gravelly subsoil, very loose gravel subsoil on the property. They brought in tons and tons and tons of topsoil when they developed the property. Along Michigan Avenue, our house is 928 Michigan Avenue. About 5 houses down, there used to be a concrete company. And where our greenhouse and horticulture training center is, between that and Kingman, there's this huge valley. And that is an old gravel quarry where they were digging out gravel to make their concrete. Again, this is back before the 40s, I think, back in the 20s and 30s and so forth, when this was in operation. So dynamite, and the other thing is, I guess everybody had a stick of dynamite in their garage back at that time, was what everybody always joked about also. It was all the way up until Bob Lerner. You guys, many of you, I know Bob Lerner. He was the director of Kingman Museum beginning in 1981, along with Janet Detweiler, Mary Ann Bridges, who was the Civic Improvement Chairwoman of the WNF and GA. Does anybody know what that would represent? WNF and GA? I'm not sure what that is. Robert Tompkins, Maureen Reed, both of the Doty Native Flower Association, Truman Stallo, who was chairman of the advisory committee for the City of Battle Creek Parks and Recreation Department. And really through Bob's wish and direction, what they had is weeds and vines growing in the trees at this point. And again, the city did not have a budget. I never want to disparage the city for not caring for the property. They did. They just didn't have the ability to elevate it back to arboretum stature. And through Bob's efforts, along with Al Wilcutt, who's a city planner, Faith Ruggink, who was a botanist, KCC Biological Science Department, Bobby Wilson, who was one of our founding mothers of the Leila Arboretum Society. She was part of the Leila Arboretum and Botanical Gardens Development Committee. And they got together and through a grassroots effort, developed the Leila Arboretum Society and created what has become, I think, a very successful public-private relationship where you have this private nonprofit managing a public piece of property. And we've been doing that now for, they became incorporated as a nonprofit in 1984. So we're at, what, 36 years or so here now, 35, as a nonprofit. It was in September of 1982 that Dr. John Schwartz, former Senator Schwartz, donated their first $100 to get the Leila Arboretum Society up and running. That'd take more like $100,000 to do nowadays. So like I say, we became incorporated as a nonprofit in 1984. And when you look at the collections out there, you see this huge gap. There are these old, larger trees that are from the 1922, oh, I'm sorry, you guys didn't see it. 1922, 23, 24, and then nothing all the way up until 1984. And I've had the great pleasure of that 35 years or so, I've been there for 20, to have planted, I'm sure, several thousand trees now at this point. There were some years where we were planting 400 and 500 trees early on. I started in 98. All the way through 2000, we were planting a lot of trees on the property. One of my goals is to diversify the age range of our collections, because we have the unfortunate situation where many of those older trees are now more susceptible to disease and pest attack. We've been losing a lot of our Scotch pines, so you want to have an age staggering, but also a variety of different plants as well. And we've been adding a variety of different cultivars and things like that to our collections over the years. So I have this piece that you could take this. So this is a little bit of an FYI. I see that's from 2017, 2018. Also along the way, so you had, when Kingman Museum was constructed, it was intended to be part of the Battle Creek Public School System. And it was operated by the Battle Creek Public School System for years and years and years until they started to suffer from budgetary issues and had to cut back their budgeting. And eventually they had to back out of operation of the Arboretum altogether. And I found this flyer. This was kind of interesting. I was digging holes and planting trees. I wasn't in a leadership position at this time. But when the school totally backed out of the Arboretum, the Leila Arboretum Society was going to take over the building. But we were not in the management of natural history collections. So there was, for a while, again, a really great grassroots effort of relocating Kingman Museum to, do you guys recognize the building in this picture? I don't know if you can see it closely enough.
Is that the new one?
This is on Hamlin Street.
Is it the mill?
Yeah, this is actually the Farm Bureau, where the Farm Bureau is. So there was, and there's no date on this. My recollection is it was around 2000, somewhere around in there, that they were actually looking for a place to move Kingman Museum's collections because Leila Arboretum Society was going to. I remember the leadership saying, we don't want an empty building. We don't want it sitting around waiting for something, so let's go in and this will become our headquarters and so forth. Well, actually, that didn't work out because it says our current location is proposed home for the Leila Arboretum Society. I'll hand this around as well.
I think Bob was behind that a lot.
Moving it to a different location. Ultimately, what happened is a very similar grassroots effort which was done to create Lila was done to create the Kingman Museum Incorporated, a separate nonprofit. So we abandoned our goal of moving into the building, and the Kingman Museum nonprofit was started and has been operational. And again, I think that was around the 2000s, early 2000 or something like that took place. And they work hard and they struggle, and they have a new great executive director, Altina DeYoung. She's come in and doing a lot of wonderful things, and I see them stabilizing quite a bit. We're strategic partners. We're campus partners with Kingman Museum, and we offer a lot of jointly offer a lot of educational programs and things like that. 21st Century Program, Early Childhood Connections, Willard Library reading programs, and things like that. Our Spooky Science Saturday, hands-on science learning opportunities. It's kind of like a trunk or treat, but with science activity stations. We work together really well nowadays, but it wasn't always the rosiest relationship, as you can imagine. I remember a time when leadership of the Arboretum was afraid to do things on the Arboretum property because it was owned by the city. And as part of that is we built the Children's Garden, our 1-acre outdoor hands-on learning garden, and that was modeled very much so after Cereal City. A lot of the feasibility study was modeled after Cereal City, and we know what happened with Cereal City in that they did not get the visitation that they needed to be viable and sustainable. And our Children's Garden kind of went through that same thing. We had this goal of like 30,000 people a year going through the Children's Garden alone, and it just didn't work out that way. We didn't have enough to be this strong destination. And our efforts that we've been putting into the property over the last 10 to 15 years have been with the goal of creating this strong destination in partnership with Kingman. And we have built a new pavilion up on the overlook and the new stage that's in the Fantasy Forest, which was this wonderful chainsaw carving park. And I can tell you that display does not exist anywhere in the country. There is not. The chainsaw carvers came from all over, and they were the ones who were telling us, you guys have something here that does not exist anyplace else. Yes, there are these carved trees. I went to a city of Ridgeway, Pennsylvania, to do some research about the chainsaw carving events. And every bank, every business in Ridgeway has a chainsaw carving, and the street trees along Ridgeway, when they die, they carve them into sculpture and so forth. But this confluence of 26 trees, half of them standing on their own roots, all in this one area as a park setting, does not exist anyplace else. And I can also tell you another little tidbit is that ash trees are green or white ash. There's a variety of others that are not as common. There are 7.5 billion ash trees at risk of being killed by emerald ash borer just east of the Mississippi. As a comparison, many of you may remember our American elm trees being killed by Dutch elm disease. That was only in the millions, like it wasn't even a billion trees that were killed by Dutch elm disease. So the presence of ash is that much higher, and the destruction that they're causing. Emerald ash borer showed up in the Detroit area around 2002, and it's just kind of progressively spread. So when our trees were killed, I actually drive by a chainsaw carver's house on my way to work on Morgan Road, stopped in and chatted with him, and we originally had the goal of having one tree carved. And as the conversation grew and the Women Who Care, the philanthropy group Women Who Care, gave us our first donation towards the project, and we've got some other great people on board, and it became this RFP for artists, and next thing you know, there were originally 44 trees in that site, green and white ash trees, all about 100 years old. We saved 16 and had those carved, and then we brought in logs from around the community off of Kirby and things like that, where county was doing some clearing, and ended up with 26 trees in total. One of those is up at Kingman. Here's another piece. Our logo, our motto is Explore, Discover, Enjoy. Our mission statement is to preserve, enhance horticulture and the arts in a natural setting. I love our mission statement. It embraces truly the reason why I got into horticulture to begin with, because it is a marriage of science and art. I was an outdoor kid and like doing that kind of thing, but I also like to see things designed aesthetically together in beautiful colors and so forth. And I always like the science aspect of intensive plant management and care of plants. This is another piece. So, we've added, there's always been lots of activity from the teddy bear picnic and pioneer days and things like that have gone on at the Arboretum. But going back to about 2008 or so, the number of events that we offer has just gone up and up and up. And I'll always say that we love gardeners and we love gardening, but they alone were not a sustainable scenario for us at the Arboretum. And the Battle Creek Metropolitan Area Mustache Society showed up one day and said, "Hey, we would like to have a cardboard sled competition out in the Arboretum. What do you think of that?" And I kind of had to pause for a minute, but I also had to laugh because of all the years I worked at the Arboretum, there's hundreds of people on the sledding hills on a Saturday, and we could never figure out how to engage with them. It's like, oh, do we go out and set up a stand, we sell hot cocoa, and it's not going to pay for itself. This past year was our 11th year for the cardboard sled races, and it brings out 1,000 people with decent weather every time. It is a really fun community event, and it generates positive revenue and so forth, and it gets people onto your site that weren't necessarily there for the plants to begin with. The same thing goes on with the Carboretum Car Show. That's now about 8 years old, and I can tell you the first time we hosted it, because there used to be a car show back in the day, if you will, and we brought that back. And I had a gentleman who was age 65, born and raised in Battle Creek, and had never been in Leila Arboretum before. So we're starting to reach further into our community and be this even more viable and truly sustainable space by having more donors and friends and events that generate revenue and so forth. And that's the way we're trying to move forward these days. And we know, everybody loves music, but not everybody's into plants and gardening. So how do we get them out to our site? And while they're out there, hopefully they're looking at a tag and going, oh, that's a cool tree, and here's a tag on it and tells me a little bit of information about it. We added a 18-hole disc golf course a few years ago, and then 2 or 3 years ago, we had an Eagle Scout who was looking for a project, and I said, hey, this is what we're going to do. We're going to walk the disc golf course. I'm going to identify trees for you, and then you're going to go do research and find a 1-sentence, 2-sentence piece of information about that tree, and we'll put the sign on the tree so that these disc golfers, while they're going through the property, will learn hopefully a little bit while they're out there playing. And it builds off of the children's garden, and its original purpose and design was that the kids are out having fun, but they're learning at the same time, secretly learning at the same time. Again, part of our strategic partnership and work together, we actually offer joint membership opportunities with Kingman and Lyle these days. Like I said, that wasn't always the case. One of the cool things about memberships with us is we both have reciprocal admission opportunities, For Lila, we're a member of the American Horticulture Society, and as such, you can get into other botanic gardens and arboreta all around the country for free through your membership with Leila Arboretum. There is a 60-mile exception to that, so it's kind of hit and miss. It depends on who the volunteer or staff person is up at Frederick Meyer Gardens. Like, sometimes you get in for free, sometimes they don't honor it, but you know, I get it. For large metropolitan areas where you have multiple gardens on top of each other, you don't want to go buy the cheap membership over at, you know, Dawes or something like that and be able to get in someplace else for free. But I'll pass around membership brochures if you're not a member. And then as part of the, what is it, I always forget. Let me steal that from you real quick. Yeah, the ASTC, American Society of, I forget what it is. Kingman, through their membership, you can get into other natural history museums and other types of museums as well. So it can be quite valuable if you travel or maybe buy it for a family member who lives out of town and so forth. We are really, these days, you know, it was, again, when Lila gave the property to the city, it's written in the deed that this needs to be free and available to our residents. And so you can't charge a gate admission and so forth. But it was not, we were not always allowed to generate revenue off the property through events or other things. That we had to actually work with the city and change that at some point along the way. And maybe that was when the fear of, you know, when we built the pavilion out there and the stage out there, we don't have specific ownership of that. We're allowed to operate it, and certainly we get to care for it as well. But nowadays we are looking at rental opportunities and being able to have weddings. There is a wedding up on the Overlook Hill today. I could hear everybody up there screaming and yelling and having a good time. And we can generate revenue from that rental. Tours, we had a bus tour that was in on Friday. I believe that bus tour came out of the Detroit area over this way, and it's something we want to work on even more. We know that a lot of bus tours in Michigan are centered out of the southeastern part of the state, and they tend to go up towards Frankenmuth and these other well-known destinations. And more often, they're coming over this way. And anybody who's leadership here, I would love to talk with you about the opportunity in working with bus tours that could come and see Kingman, see Lila, come over to the Regional History Museum, and I think together we make this great statement and can compel people to come over and visit Battle Creek. We have a lot of great assets in this community, you know, beyond the zoo and beyond Lila and Kingman and so forth. Oak Hill Cemetery is a wonderful destination. There are famous musicians buried in Oak Hill Cemetery, along with a lot of the serial wealth and power as well. So I'll hand this around. This is some information about our rental opportunities that we have. As a nonprofit, you know, we try to you know, help nonprofit organizations. If we don't have a cost associated with your rental, we can make it free or really inexpensive, like a $50 rental for nonprofits. So if you guys have a lot of space, but if you ever need something, you know, in a place to have an event or something like that, the Children's Garden or Kaleidoscope Garden is a great place to do it as well. Please consider that. Birthday parties and whatnot. Maybe the signature event that we have nowadays is the Lollapalooza Music Festival. We hired a person this year as a bit of a trial. We're going to give it a 2-year window of time to go out and sell sponsorships for events. It's not something we've actively pursued in the last few years. So we're kind of leaving a lot of money on the table, if you will. Lollapalooza generates positive revenue. The bands donate their time, which really makes it a win for us. We have 62 bands that are scheduled to play at Lollapalooza this year. There'll be 6 stages, 62 bands, 3 beer garden areas. other activities going on, and it's become kind of the big event next to breakfast table and some of these other long-term things.
Did you say 3 or 3?
Three stages.
Oh.
Three. Beers for cash. Cash bar. We do charge. It's free to get in, but it is $10 per vehicle for parking. So to go, an opportunity to see potentially 60 bands for $10 per vehicle, per 4 people in the vehicle, and you're $250 a piece out of pocket. It's a pretty cheap date. It really is, and we want to keep it that way as long as possible. And we've started working with other groups. We have a heavy metal festival that's been out in the Arboretum for a couple years. There's an audience for that. We've started a Thursday evening August series called Believe in Battle Creek Free Music Series. It will be on Thursdays. They start at 7 o'clock, and then we're working with other nonprofits as collaborators. We have Sprout Urban Farms, Kingman Museum, and the Music Center will all work with us. And what we ask is that you promote and advertise the event, and that you field 3 to 4 volunteers for the day of to help run the event. And as such, we will share proceeds from the night. Last year, we had 300-400 people that were showing up each night. We had the Sojourner Truth Youth Choir perform. We were to have a quartet from the symphony, but they got rained out. Julie Lauer and Barefoot Blonde, she's a local rock cover band with powerhouse vocals that kind of does the bar scene around here. They played. Who else do we have? Ciro City Concert Band. They'll be playing again this year. We also have a country western band that's going to be playing one night called Lipstick and Whiskey. There's just a lot of fun ongoing activities. I'd like to have something going on the stage and in the Fantasy Forest area, once a month, maybe twice a month. We'll get to the point where we have to remind ourselves we're a botanic garden first and a music venue second. That's a good problem to have. I've actually gotten to the point where I covet flat parking space. We have this beautiful rolling property, and you're going, where's the cornfield so we can put all these thousands of people in cars and so forth when we have an event? That's a great problem to have. I sit on the board for the Calhoun County Visitors Bureau. Your Visitors Bureau generates its revenue through a tax on hotel stays. So anything we can do to put heads in beds and get people to come to Battle Creek from outside and spend the night here and explore our city and all the great things that we have, that's what I think our nonprofits should be doing over and above their local programming. And last year through the Kaleidoscope and the 365 Farm, we had about 7,500 students and parents go through our educational programs for youth. So we're kind of trying to do different things on a lot of different levels. And like I say, anything that we can do to help Battle Creek, help Lila grow, be sustainable. Volunteer time, we have 3.5 professional full-time staff for 85 acres. It pains me to go up to Michigan State to the Children's Garden, and they've got 35 students for like a 2-acre space. But we're pretty darn close at our care as well. We bring on a number of seasonals each year. We started a farm stand, 2 or 3 years ago?
Actually, this is the 3rd year.
This is our 3rd season. We have a farm stand on Michigan Avenue. Its goal, Leila Arboretum's in a food desert, which means that the residents around us do not have a fresh local food source within walking distance of their homes. They have to be able to drive to go get food. To the Family Fair on Michigan Avenue, Meyer and so forth, Horrocks downtown, you have to drive to get there. So Lila and our farm stand can serve a purpose for access to fresh produce. And we accept WIC and EBT, Senior Project Fresh, and those kinds of things again. But we also want it to be a viable, sustainable farm, so that's why we're selling to restaurants. We sell from the farm stand, and we're using it as an educational tool for health and wellness, as well as a program for the Arboretum. Let's see here. I think I had one. I think that's essentially what I was trying to cover. I absolutely love the fact that we're still doing what Lila had envisioned and the city leaders had envisioned back at that time. I had one of my volunteers come over and lobby to, I say you guys, and I don't know who exactly is a part of Regional History Museum, and I said if they're looking to build new versus remodel, they've got to think about Leila Arboretum as a potential site. We would love to have more partners in our area. We would love to get back to, if the Art Center ever says, hey, we're too big for this building, we need to think of something else. Think potentially of Leila Arboretum as a place to move to. If we're going to do anything new like that, Lila should be in the consideration because that really does embrace that original vision. I think we're trying to do it on our own, and I say it a little bit tongue-in-cheek about others showing up there, but it's true. It's really a possibility, and it like I say, it warms my heart to think that we still have this great idea that is viable. It's important to the community. I think it's important to our youth and education, and any child who went through the Battle Creek Public School System remembers Kingman Museum. They went through Kingman Museum, and it might be the babies in the jars or that kind of thing and so forth that you saw. I grew up across the street from the Toledo Zoo. I remember that same display at one of the museum buildings in the Toledo Zoo. I always, growing up across the street from the zoo, you could go for a few years without ever setting foot inside the fence. But then there'd be a baby hippo born. And it would be a new reason to go back and visit the zoo again. So I always make the joke of what's our next baby hippo. And when I say that to Diane Thompson out at the zoo, she says, no, that's my line. I get to say that, we're moving the wolves to a new exhibit. That's our, baby hippo, if you will. The chainsaw carvings became our baby hippo in a way. And it's a little bit of an exaggeration, I admit. But it's near daily that I see an out-of-state license plate on a vehicle at the parking lot for that chainsaw carving park. When folks come to town and visit friends and family, those friends and family say, you got to go over and check this out because it's a really cool, unique space. So hopefully we can find our next baby hippo and kind of keep this moving along. And if not, we've got great music events and other things going on. Oh, that's cool.
Cox Arboretum in Dayton, Ohio.
Oh, yeah. I haven't been there in forever.
Yeah, so they built this thing and because you've got the overlook.
Elevation? Yeah.
It's really cool.
I've had the pleasure of being up on the roof of Kingman Museum to do some roof repairs. That wasn't the pleasure, but it's the view of the Arboretum. I stood there and said, we need a cafe right here. How cool would that be? A ropes course, or zip lining through the tree canopy or something like that. These lofty goals. We purchased a dump truck last year, and we now have a 6-person golf cart, a 6-person people mover. We understand that when you come to an event, you have to park and walk a distance to get to that space. So we're trying to help people move from parking areas within event spaces. We've really kind of been checking off a lot of those to-do, a lot of those, the stage was on the master plan ever since 81, 84 or whatnot, and we finally got a stage last year. Bob and Ellie DeVries were major donors in supporting that effort, supporters of the arts in our community, among other things. And a welcome center, indoor class space, large indoor class space, would be kind of that next. That's a huge project, probably a multi-million-dollar project, and we don't know if we're there just yet. We're trying to, in the next year or two, I mentioned we hired a sponsorship person. We're really working on the operational side of things right now. We've built these new assets in 2015, 16, 17. We renovated the office, the house that we have that was donated by the Doties. New windows and siding and doors. You could see daylight through the doors. The windows rattled, You're spending a lot of money on heating and so forth. So we've been doing a lot of these things, maintaining the Kaleidoscope Garden and various assets. And that welcome center, that visitor center, is kind of becoming that next big thing that we'll look at trying to do. And I don't even know when. I can't even say that that's a capital campaign that we're looking to undertake yet. But that's about where we are in finding ways to partner and collaborate with others. So we're thrilled to be here. Any questions?
Yeah, I was wondering, now in Grand Rapids they have a sculpture park in Myers Garden, but I would like to see if there's any choice of getting more sculptures in there.
I'd love to. Craig helped us significantly in getting the horse sculpture. Was the Great American Horse, I believe, is a bronze sculpture. It was in downtown Battle Creek, and it needed to be refurbished and so forth. We actually have your watercolor drawing of the horse that you had done, and that is that we would love to add more sculpture. We've created a list of the sculpture that we have that you might not think of, like Circa, the Corten steel. To me, it looks like a gateway, like a Japanese torii gateway design. That's on the property. There's a concrete piece that's down in an arborvitae area. There's a number of bronze sculpture inside the Kaleidoscope Garden, and I would love to add more pieces like that.
How do you get those great pieces up there?
Money. Money.
Yeah.
But it also comes with, writing policy that, what you'll accept, why you'll accept it, what you won't accept types of things. This year we are hoping we have a fiberglass fabricated balloon that was, it was a fabrication of Katzinger, and I'm blanking on his first name, Dr. Katzinger, and it was called Bob's Cat. We are actually looking to have that be included with Justin Andert and the Color of the Creek effort and have it repainted this year. The paint's starting to come off the top, and the Katzingers, we've reached out and tried to make a connection to them, and we don't have that anymore. He has passed away, and the family's not around, so we think the slate is clear to do a new design. So we hope to see something fresh and interesting on the balloon. But that is a sculpture and of interest, and the leadership, when the garden was created, we had consulted with Deb Kinney and Jane Taylor, which were the designers of the children's garden at MSU. And they helped us with the children's garden here. And that balloon was placed where it was placed so that you could see it on Michigan Avenue when you're driving by and be inspired to come and check out the space. So there's a lot going on in the Arboretum already, and we would certainly like to add more. I can't say we're making a proactive effort on that right now, but local artist Nick Jakubiak had mentioned at one time maybe we could do a paper airplane that looks like it did a nosedive out in the Arboretum. I think that'd be super cool. I think that takes me back to childhood immensely, and making paper airplanes and then coloring them, drawing on them and so forth. I think that'd be great. Fun, whimsical things like that.
Brett, the other thing you didn't mention was the community garden.
Oh yes, yeah. We have I think the largest community vegetable garden. The Urbandale Community Vegetable Garden on site there were about 30 Burmese families in there for several years. Yeah, it's open and available to anybody who doesn't have a place to garden at home, you're in an apartment or whatever. We have spots available. I think they might ask for $10 to just help support, well operation and so forth. But if you know of anybody yourselves who is looking for a place to do vegetable gardening, we do have that at the Arboretum.
We had 4 families from Kenya this year.
Oh yeah, yep. Yeah, I met the one family the other day. There's a dozen other things. I mean, there's the Miss Ivadoti native flower garden that's on the property. It's a demonstration garden to inspire people to think more and use more wildflowers. It's not meant to recreate prairie. That did not exist on our property and so forth, but you have a lot of prairie plants. We have a host of native plants throughout the Arboretum. Memorial tree opportunities exist. We charge $300 for a memorial tree, or it could be an honorarium. I would rather plant more birth trees than memorial trees, right? You have a newborn and you plant a tree in their honor, and how cool would that be to come back when you're 50 and see your tree? You know, and there, like I say, there's just a multitude of things going on all the time. It is a wonderful place to work and volunteer. And I think we estimated it was over $250,000 worth of volunteer time was donated to the Arboretum last year. The nonprofit sector values adult volunteer time at just under $25 an hour. So if you had to pay for that equivalent of work, that's what it would have cost you. So I mean, we're here largely because of volunteers. Pat being one of those that's. I tell her all the time I'm going to double and triple her salary because she's at the Arboretum on a near daily basis, and we thank you. John is out there. We were just talking about oak trees that he was cutting down, and Dave is the native garden. We have a raised bed in the middle of the native garden where you can kind of have up-close personal exploration of individual native plants. Dave and his buddy Don Denoyer built that for us. I took a stab at it and did a bad job, and he took it over from me, thankfully. So really, thank you guys very much. Any other questions?
You mentioned Meyer Gardens and then MSU's many horticultural installations, but I was just kind of wondering about the Arboretum's interrelationships with other botanical gardens around the state, how you interact with them. You probably share information and that kind of thing.
You know, that's a great question. And it's with a little bit of sadness that I say not the way we used to. When I was just acting as director of horticulture, I would do that kind of thing much more so. I would travel and visit. Others would come here. Art Cameron, who was the director of MSU, was putting together a group of directors, and then we were going to meet. As I transitioned into the executive director position, it kind of wiped out my ability to do that. You know, you're now paying bills and, you know, and all those other kinds of things that comes with being the ED. So not the way we used to. We had there was about a 10 to 15 year window where we had a grant, consecutive grants from W.K. Kellogg Foundation. And part of those dollars were used to hire either students, high school students, college students, or adults in transition. And we built our horticulture training center, and they would come in and they'd work with us all summer, and we would take them around specifically to different organizations and even different types of plant-related venues. Like we would go to a vineyard because the students could learn about viticulture because maybe they would want to get into viticulture, or a legit greenhouse operation, because what I do in landscape horticulture and working outdoors is very different from the skills and that you need to successfully operate a greenhouse, a big greenhouse. And we kind of, you know, grant dollars don't last forever. And, you know, when I change positions, it's just not like it was. I say it all the time, and if I ever get to go anywhere, it's always in the middle of winter. We used to go over to Hidden Lake Gardens in the Brooklyn area. Fantastic institution. I would go speak, or we'd have somebody come over here. They have great evergreen collections at that garden. So I'm, you know, sadly not quite the Fernwood down in Niles. We would go down there from time to time, take our students and do cross collaboration. I guess I've really become hyper focused on local groups and how we can work together locally more so, while still kind of keeping an eye on quality horticulture on the site. Any other questions?
Yeah, you guys allow bird houses in the park?
We do. We have Christy Preston is a volunteer who built, I don't remember how many now, I think a dozen or so bluebird houses around the Arboretum. And then, was it last year or 2 years ago, we had another Eagle Scout who he did robin houses. He did 3 different types of bird houses, different construction design, different needs that the birds have, and those were placed on trees throughout the Arboretum. And so there's always opportunities. We always kind of try to have 2-3 projects in our back of our minds for Eagle Scouts when they show up. In the Kaleidoscope Garden, we have musical instruments like a xylophone and drumming and stepping stones that were part of an Eagle Scout project as well.
Okay. Do you guys have any ponds with, aquatics?
We do have a small pond area. It's rather shallow. Years ago, I myself, I love waterfowl and waterfowl hunter also, but I put a wood duck box on the back side of the, you can't even see it. In ours, it's called starry stonewort. It's really choked with that. It's a submergent, it's not even true vegetation. It's like an algae that will grow and kind of fill the pond. There's no fish or anything like that in there. Our property actually goes all the way over to Ridgemore. And yeah, all of that wetland area all the way over to Ridgemore, I would love to someday maybe have a boardwalk or something like that. We just don't have a program built around it right now. But there is the wetland. There are a variety of, there's sweet bay magnolia and cardinal flower and a variety of different natives that are planted around that space.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, I've been to a couple of them in Florida, near Miami, I think it was. They have all kinds of stuff, in small ponds.
There's some great Audubon parks and boardwalks and things like that. South Carolina, Charleston area, and Florida, and so forth.
They have palm trees too.
Yeah. We do have some bananas we take out to the kaleidoscope garden and then bring them back in. I don't know. They never, they don't produce, but we had some fig trees and some olive trees, and you would get little figs and little olives, but they wouldn't ever become anything you could actually use. We didn't have that atrium space where you can extend their season effectively.
Did you contact Michigan State to put in, their plants, all their trees? They do a lot of experimental growing. Mm-hmm. It's off of 94, somewhere near Dexter. I forgot where it is.
Oh, no, I have not. The last connections I have had like that were with Morton Arboretum over in, I think it's Lyle, west of Chicago, and then Chicago Botanic Gardens. We have, in our Kaleidoscope parking lot, there are 4 Chinese tree lilacs, and the cultivar is Morton of those. And that's that thing, I used to go around and go visit, and you're like, hey, here's 5 plants you can take back to your arboretum and grow them on and plant them. And we're just too thinly staffed these days. When I semi-retire, I'll go back to doing that.
You used to be able to walk on the river when the river's frozen at MSU. Okay, all the way down the campus, and then during the summertime, I bet my 2 friends who couldn't. This is back in the 70s before Mexican food became real popular, and they had these, this little red hot pepper. They used to grow hot peppers in the garden. And I bet them you guys can't eat one red pepper. Okay, just a pepper. I don't know anything about it. It could have been jalapeno. I don't know. But anyways, I won the bet and I got free beer to go.
Sounds like a good plan.
Free beer would really bring in the crowd.
That's right. Yeah.
Well, it's like places are always trying to find that new thing, so like baby hippos.
Yep.
Right. Forest.
Did you see the
Oh, it still is. It's been phenomenal. Our goal is to bring back a chainsaw carving event again. There's 3 things. We're exploring what is loosely being titled an Almost Oktoberfest right now for September 21st. And the idea is to do a little bit of the traditional Oktoberfest, but then call it Almost Oktoberfest, where we can put a modern twist and wrinkle and have other shenanigans and things like that going on. Music, food, and beer would be a big part of that. I've been speaking with the director from Charitable Union. Charitable Union receives hundreds and hundreds of prom dresses and bridesmaid gowns and things like that. So we're talking about having a prom dress run. I'd like to call it a 5K-ish because to me, you make guys and gals wear high heels and dresses and go running and turn that into a lot of fun and shenanigans. And I don't know if it needs to be a legit 5K or not, but and then the other one is bringing back a chainsaw event, not necessarily with the purpose of adding significant sculpture to the Arboretum. I would love for us to have another one or two, and that adds, you know, say you've been out several times and seen it, gives you a reason to come back and see some of the new sculpture. You know, one of our sculptors from Virginia, Mike Ayers, he and Jim Denkins carved the big green dragon, Drago the green dragon. They came in second in Germany in a speed carving competition the year of our event. They are phenomenal carvers, internationally successful carvers. And you know, having them come and do demonstrations and things like that, we learned was enough to attract people and interest people. So, you know, maybe having Mike do as many speed carvings as he can on the stage, you know, and have that be an exciting thing to see. Auctions, so folks could take these back to their houses or businesses or whatnot, would be kind of, you know, and then food, music, and beer as part of it. So we would like to bring back a chainsaw carving event. And not have all the scaffolding that we had up. That nearly, our committees were just wiped out after those 2 years of hosting that. 3 stories of scaffolding really wears out volunteers, apparently.
So, that was great. But next time you could include one free beer with each event.
Craig, you're saying to me that you want to lead a committee. That's what if you have an idea, you know, we all have ideas, but if you want to make it happen, sign up for that committee, right?
I went to Midland, they have a canopy walk that opened up. Have you heard about that?
No,
in Midland?
yeah.
A lot of funding, but it's a longest canopy walk. It's beautiful.
Cool, yeah, very cool. I haven't been to Midland in a bunch of years now either.
They have the treads too.
Yeah, I have a friend who's a city horticulturist, and yeah, I need to travel a little bit. That's great. That sounds really cool. I'd love to do that. Absolutely. Toledo Zoo, if you guys are looking for a zoo, and actually the part of the zoo I grew up across the street from was, oddly enough, their botanic gardens. And I'm a kid sitting there just bashing the lawnmower against the tree, and my dad's telling me I'm going to kill the tree, and I'm going, I'm not going to kill the tree, and here I end up being a horticulturist and trying to plant trees, and the botanic gardens across the street. But the Toledo Zoo is a really top-notch zoo if you're looking for a place to visit. Detroit Zoo is wonderful. Of course, Binder is fantastic.
The art museum and the glass portion of the art museum is by far the
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you all very much for having me here today. I love talking about the Arboretum. We hope to see you out on a daily basis.